All right, Hunter, welcome back to another Games of the Day preview show. It'll be a game of the day for today on Friday, and then also touch on a couple of the games that are going to be tomorrow, which is Saturday. The line's just coming out for those from DraftKings. Hunter, how are you doing? And Wednesday was another day where road teams in college basketball, specifically the Big East, it just continues to not go well for them. UConn goes down rather easily, very similar to how Marquette lost to Providence, just kind of got blown out. How are you feeling? And what are your thoughts on what took place a couple days ago?
Doing well headed into the holiday weekend. A lot of basketball going on this week, a lot of day games today. So if you're into some mid-major battles and you're not working too hard on a Friday, some stuff to check out. Yeah, continue to see road teams struggle. Villanova obviously got that great win at Creighton, but Marquette goes on the road and gets blown out by Providence. UConn goes on the road and gets blown out by Seton Hall. It'll be interesting to see if that's how the Big East is going to be this year, or you're going to have the 12-6 conference champion, or if UConn or Marquette's going to right the ship and be able to go get those road wins, you're going to be looking at like a 15-3 type conference champion.
Yeah, and I think in some ways, it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise for the Big East. St. John's picks up that victory. That's going to carry, Seton Hall picks up that victory. That's going to carry a ton of weight all the way to Selection Sunday. Providence, I don't think, is going to need to worry about Selection Sunday too much. They look like they're going to be a serious contender for a reasonable seed in the tournament. But yeah, the Big East, we talked about it a little bit, or we've talked about a reasonable amount as the season's kind of progressed along, that this was looking like Marquette and UConn. It's that tier one, and then Creighton kind of fell out of the tier one into the tier two. Creighton now, Creighton, it's officially, we're waving the red flags. We're concerned. The red siren emoji. I've got concerns there just because this is another game, that Villanova game, where they kind of just got out physicaled when it slowed down into a half court battle. They just couldn't score the basketball. And it was, shout out to Neptune, coach of Villanova there, for he needed a big win and he went and got it. And it was a big second half comeback. And I think you tweeted about it, but Dixon's fantastic for them. They did that without Justin Moore. Are you joining me in the red flag, red siren emojis for Creighton now?
Creighton struggles when the game gets physical. One of the things they're best at is not fouling. But when the game gets in the half court and it gets really physical, that's just not the Blue Jays style of basketball. They want to get up and down. They want to take shots in transition. And we saw that when they got into the half court offense, they really struggled. It was a lot of Trey Alexander and Bailey Shireman just going one-on-one, trying to create their own shot. And that's just not where they're at their best, because when they're in the half court, Kalkbrenner kind of gets uninvolved. Farabello's a three-point shooter, but he can't really create anything. Yeah, Creighton, they're definitely not in that top tier that we thought they were going to be in. I think they're closer to falling behind a Providence than they are to getting up to a Marquette or UConn.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Villanova, they just continue this roller coaster season. We talked about it when we were kind of talking about the spread of that game being 9.5. I think Villanova's spread should be like plus or minus 3 against almost any opponent that they play. There's really no rhyme or reason. They shoot a ton of threes and they usually brick a ton of them. But then they start falling, make enough of them, which opens up the lane where Dixon can drive. And they've got a lot of guys who are good going to the rim, but they shoot too many threes. I still think they start cutting down on those 3-point attempt numbers that will improve the outcomes for this Villanova team. But at this point, as long as they play about 500 ball in the Big East, they should be able to be a tournament team. And that's just not one of I think we've said this before. That's not going to be a team that you're going to want any business with in the first or second round of an NCAA tournament.
Nova's going to be dangerous coming into the tournament. They're going to be underseeded just because of the losses that they already have. But yeah, if you get Nova on the 8 or 9 line, that's going to be a tough round of 32 matchup for a 1 seed.
Certainly will be. And Duke takes down Baylor. That was a game that was back and forth pretty much the whole game. About 4 minutes to go, Duke kind of went on a run, and there just wasn't enough time for Baylor to respond to that. That's 2 straight losses for Baylor. I'm not going to raise any serious concerns on them quite yet, but they may not be of the caliber we thought they were. They've got a lot of good pieces. They've just struggled a little bit in these games against more disciplined and solid defensive and offensive teams that maybe they hadn't faced so far. But I still like Baylor to improve as this season goes on and be a threat in the Big 12. Probably not a threat to win the conference with Houston and Kansas up there, but I'm not going to be too concerned about this Baylor team. But a solid win for Duke and a nice feather in their cap heading into ACC play.
Baylor's offense is what Baylor's offense has been the last few years, but their defense has actually really fallen off. They're not even in the top 70 now in defending. And we saw it against Duke. They couldn't keep guys off the dribble out of the paint. Ray J. Dennis is a great scorer. Jacoby Walter is a great scorer, but they're just not defending at the level. The Baylor blueprint when they won the national championship was that they had three guards that could absolutely guard anyone in the country, and then they could score on the other end. This team has guys that can score against anyone, but they just don't have that defensive prowess. So it's surprising for a Scott Drew team. That's really where they hang their hat usually. But yeah, they're not in the top 70, and they fell off last year as well. So something to monitor as they head into conference play if they're going to be able to guard.
Yeah, they kind of rely on Messi to block shots in there, and he did a reasonable job of that for the most part. And it started to look like in that second half, it's something we talked about, the athleticism for Baylor causing problems for Filipowski and Duke. That was starting to happen, but then Roach and those guys off of the dribble, they just kept getting to the lane, and there's nothing that Baylor could do to stop them. It'll be interesting to see if maybe Scott Drew adapts the defense going into Big 12 play, plays a little bit more, not quite all the way up on you on the perimeter and forces you into some longer shots, because they definitely have the scoring to stay in almost any game. Dennis is I think he treated as the best scorer in basketball going to his left. He just goes to that left, either shoots little floater, spins back to the right. He is almost unstoppable. And then Walter, and they've got those shooters on the perimeter. But a good win for Duke. And it'll be interesting to see how Duke fares come ACC play, but they should be pretty formidable against most of the ACC, which isn't that strong outside of the top teams. And speaking of the ACC, a game that we talked about was going to be a stay away for us just because of that potential home court advantage for North Carolina, and Oklahoma hadn't gone on the road yet. Another one where that's not going to be any fault for me for Oklahoma, but that's a win that North Carolina kind of needed, and they took care of business rather comfortably there as well.
North Carolina looked like the North Carolina that people were expecting and hoping for coming into the season. Armando Bacot finally had a really good game. RJ Davis is playing like an All-American. I think he had 23 or 24 points. He's just running the show. He can get his own off the dribble. He's been really good at setting his teammates up. Harrison Ingram's really good on the wing. He's an NBA guy, and when he gets it going, he's really hard to guard. Cormac Ryan's a bit more of a wild card on the opposite side. The thing for me with North Carolina is I don't know if they have the depth. Once they get into the bench, there's not really a lot of guys that come in and contribute, but they're five with Davis, Cadeau, Ryan, Ingram, and Bacot can play with anyone when they're on.
Yeah, there's a Kansas-ish element to this North Carolina team that lacks a little depth. I think the Kansas starting lineup probably a slight edge over this North Carolina starting lineup, but a similar concept in that these teams can play with anybody when they've got their five out there, but they get in foul trouble or any sort of issues like that becomes a little bit of a problem for them. And then the other game, this was a fun one to watch, Arizona against Alabama. Arizona got off to a little bit of a slow start. Took them a while to get going. Caleb Love didn't play very well, but they've got so many different pieces that can beat you. And Alabama, we've talked about them. It's this run and gun, shoot threes, no real discipline on the offensive end. They foul every possession on the defensive end. It fouls out their front court. That's 3 straight games that their front court was in serious foul trouble pretty much from the jump. It was a style of play that worked last year for Nate Oates. It's worked before for him when they're a little bit better on the defensive end, but there's liabilities this year on the defensive end. In Alabama, they've fallen out of 13 in the BCI. The computers still love them because of the offensive efficiency. They only shoot layups and 3-pointers, which is like the modern analytics dream. But this Alabama team, for me, they'll probably beat some teams in the SEC. They'll get hot from 3. They'll knock some people off, but this isn't anywhere near a Final Four contending Alabama team that the computers seem to still think they might be, in my opinion.
They're a team that on any given night can knock off anyone just because of the style of play, but they're not a team that's going to put together 6 wins in a row in the NCAA tournament. It's just too volatile, and when the shots aren't falling, they don't really work to get to the rim or try other things. They're consistent with their system. They're going to just keep casting them up, letting them fly. But you mentioned on the other end, Alabama's been good defensively in previous years, and they just don't have that interior presence this year. Pringle is athletic, but he's not a big body. He's long in there. And then the backup, Wyu, he's athletic again, but both of them just try to block every shot, and they get in foul trouble really quickly.
Yeah, 299th in defensive efficiency here. And that's because of the pace that they play, and 299 defensive efficiency is not going to get the job done in any way, shape, or form. And then just Arizona, we'll talk about them here in a second in this FAU game, but a solid win for them, a solid bounce back after that Purdue game. They just have so many different pieces that it doesn't really matter if 1 or 2 of them aren't firing. Somebody else can pick up the slack. Pella Larson, a guy I talked about who wasn't really good in that Purdue game, was really good in the Alabama game. Ballo, obviously, on the inside. He's a little, I expected him to be a little more polished this year than he is. He still misses some like very easy shots, which is a concern a little bit for me. And we saw that against a team like Purdue, but in the Pac-12, and we'll talk about this FAU game, which I think will be interesting in a second. But Arizona, good bounce back win for them, and they are who we know they are.
Yeah, Arizona's one of the best teams in the country. That Purdue loss doesn't mean anything. They're still one of my favorites to get to the Final Four. Ballo is definitely a brute force down low, but he puts a lot of fouls on the other team's front line, and he's just a lot to work with. He's good enough now that teams are starting to send a double team at him, which opens up that inside-out game for Arizona. And Kylan Boswell's looks so good. He just runs the show for them. And I know Caleb Love gets all the hype coming over from UNC and his scoring ability, but Boswell's really the guy that gets them into their actions and gets guys wide open shots.
That is very true. And like we said, we'll talk about them against FAU here in just a second. The first game of the day, moving into the previews and selections here, it is number 16, Illinois, the Illini, playing against number 82, Missouri, in their annual rivalry game here in St. Louis. The line here, you can get a -6 on Illinois, plus 6.5 on Missouri, and an over-under in the 148.5 to 149.5 range. This is an Illinois team that we saw play against FAU at Madison Square Garden. Terrence Shannon is fantastic for them. He continues to elevate himself towards a fringe candidate for player of the year. I mentioned him at 70-1 a couple of weeks ago. And then Marcus Damask, a guy that we saw absolutely light up Madison Square Garden. Their style of play, it's pretty straightforward when you look at it statistically. They want to play iso ball. They want to drive to the rim. They want to try to posterize you. They want to try to go in the lane, jump stop, and score from there. We look at that against this Missouri defense, which I think will be interesting to see, because I watched this Missouri team against Seton Hall last week, and Seton Hall was getting to the rim at will against this Missouri team. And I think there's going to be plenty of points in the paint for Illinois. They're 45th in the country in 2-point scoring. The Missouri defense 182nd in that department. And also on the glass, Illinois 69th, because if you go in the lane, you toss those shots up. A lot of times you can jump up, toss it back in. Missouri 322nd in the country there. And then this Illinois defense is where they hang their hat, the number 2 defense in effective field goal percentage in the country. So I'm going to go with the -6 here. I know this isn't a game you said you had a great feel for, but I'll go with the Illinois -6 here. I think they're far and away the better team, and I think they match up pretty well against this Missouri squad. But any thoughts in general about Illinois, who's only got 2 losses so far this season, and those are to Tennessee and Marquette?
Illinois is a really physical team. You mentioned it on both ends of the floor. On offense, they like to get to the rack. They have a lot of athleticism. They get a lot of putbacks. But on defense, they're just so physical. They get up in you when they on-ball defend. And then they have rim protectors on the back end. They're a really athletic team. And they really pride themselves on the defensive end. Illinois is physical, and I see why you like that Illinois -6 in this game. It's just a tough matchup for Missouri.
Yeah, and also Missouri, their whole game is shooting threes. They're 37th in the country in 3-point attempts, shooting them on 45% of the possessions. Illinois only surrenders the 10th most 3-point attempts in the country. So I think they're going to get Missouri off of the 3-point line and force Missouri to try to go to the rim, where Illinois has the 4th best rim protection in the country. So I just think it's a really good matchup for Illinois, just the style of play. They want to go down the lane and get to the rim, and they want to defend that on the opposite side of the court. And that's almost exactly what Seton Hall did to Missouri, and it worked out pretty well for them. This obviously a rivalry game, so that would be my concern here. Our colleague Steve went to Illinois. He told me to stay away from this one, so that is a PSA to everybody that an Illinois graduate has told me not to bet Illinois -6, but I'm going to go down this path anyway and take it. But what should be a good game. Missouri really needs this one. They're number 82 in the VCI. They're 7-4. They're 1-3 against quad 1 VCI opponents. So if you're Missouri, you really need this one. But I think Illinois takes care of business here and presents themselves to me as the clear number 2 in the Big Ten behind Purdue.
I like that. I think they're the second best team in the Big Ten.
And that will be the one game for us today. And that moves us into tomorrow. These lines just came out, so you may get better or worse odds than we are about to talk about for both of these ones. This now turns into one of the better games of the season, at least in the VCI. Arizona, number 3. FAU's moved all the way up to number 7 in the VCI. This a noon Pacific tip at the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas, Arizona, getting some reps in at the Pac-12 tournament site where they will be heavily favored, I would imagine, come March. What are your thoughts on this one? Two high-scoring teams. Over under here, 161, and the opening spread was Arizona minus 6.5.
Going to be a fun game. Going to be a game where both teams are getting up and down the court. FAU, Computer Darlings, at number 7 in the VCI. They just play a really pretty brand of basketball. They're either getting shots at the rim or they're getting kickouts for those open looks. I think it might be a little bit of a tough matchup for them with Arizona just because it's not like a style clash. FAU plays into Arizona's hands of playing quickly and taking long shots. If Arizona can get out and rebound and run, you see that high total at 161. I think any game that's in the 80s really favors this Arizona team.
Yeah, and we look at the stats here. Arizona, they are still one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country, 43rd in the country. FAU does not defend the three-point line very well at all. They're 230th in three-point shooting. We saw that against Illinois. FAU is going to give you wide open threes if you want them, and I think Arizona is going to knock down plenty of those. Also on the offensive glass, Arizona 19th, FAU 132. What's the name of the big guy for FAU? Hold on, let me.
Vladislav Golden.
Yeah, Golden. He's great, but once Golden gets in foul trouble or he goes out of the game, they really don't have anything on the interior. So Arizona's got all sorts of depth, all sorts of athleticism. I think they're going to have plenty of points on the board. And then on the other side of the floor, FAU shoots a reasonable amount of threes. Arizona surrenders a lot of threes. Their defense, they kind of lay back and protect the key. And that's where FAU is 23rd in the country in three-point shooting. They get up 38% of their shots from three. Arizona allows 40% of their shots from three. So I think FAU is going to knock down plenty of threes in this game as well. And we also have a couple of teams that get to the free throw line a fair amount. Arizona doesn't foul too much, but I think these teams get to the line. And so I like the over here, the over 161. We'll see how that line moves, but I'll take the over 161 now, especially when we look at the fact that in these games where FAU has played against high major top opponents, the score against Illinois, 98-89. The score against Texas A&M, 96-89. The score against Butler, 91-86. They've played they want to try to outscore you against these top level opponents. I think they know against an Arizona, they don't have the size, the athleticism necessarily to play a half court game. They've just got to try to get buckets. So, and that's obviously how Arizona plays. So I think this is going to be a high scoring game. And I think this total might have come down a little bit because the Arizona-Alabama total was so high and that game went under pretty comfortably. I think these are over basketball teams, and give me Vegas, give me the vibes, give me the over 161.
I like the over 161. FAU's got bucket getters. You mentioned that Arizona's going to give up some threes. FAU's really good at knocking down those threes. And then going the other way, I think the Owls are going to have a really difficult time defending this Wildcats team.
Yeah, and I expect Arizona to win this game. I like the spread too, but I think I'll take the over here and just hope for some high-scoring basketball, which I do expect to take place. But if you're FAU, this is a great opportunity. Another one of those no-lose situations. If they can somehow beat Arizona, they'll go into AAC play with a chance to be contending for a top 3 seed, probably in the NCAA tournament. Because I think only Memphis would be their challenge there. And if they could pick up a win or two against Memphis, that'll strengthen the resume. So Dusty May, he's largely gotten through the non-conference season, and I think he'd be happy with. Obviously, that loss to Bryant is one that he wouldn't have been expecting, but they've taken care of business against most of their high major opponents, and they get kind of a free roll of the dice in Vegas tomorrow.
I like what FAU's done with their non-conference. They weren't afraid to go out, and they got themselves a bunch of opportunities to pick up good wins, which they're going to need. You know, maybe they get to play Memphis 3 times, twice in the regular season and once in the conference tournament. But FAU really needed to go out and get those good opportunities early on if they wanted to move up the seed line. They're obviously going to be a tournament team, but this really gives them the opportunity to be in that 3 or 4 range.
Yep, absolutely. And the final game that we'll be chatting about for tomorrow, this is an early start, 9 o'clock Pacific, 12 Eastern in Providence, Rhode Island. It's number 61 Butler against number 41 Providence, and Providence flying high off of that dominating victory against Marquette. That's another home game feather in the cap for the Friars now, who have beaten Marquette by 15 at home and beaten Wisconsin by 13 at home. So both of their kind of marquee home games, they have taken care of business. Butler travels on the road here for only the second time. Their other road game was at Michigan State, where they got handled pretty comfortably. We get a line here of Providence -6. The over-under, I'm not sure. I think it was in like the 140s. Thoughts here? I think I lean Providence just as we see a team going on the road for the first time in a meaningful game in conference. And so far, those have been pretty one-sided.
I like Providence. They have one of the best home court advantages in the country. They're looking to roll off that momentum from beating Marquette, and they just defend. They're so good defensively that I think Butler's really going to struggle going on the road and running their offense. I trust the Friars to cover the -6.
Yeah, Butler doesn't get to the free throw line. They're 278th in free throw shooting, and Providence doesn't foul. And so, if you're not getting, there's not a lot of ways you're going to score against this Providence team. Getting to the line would hopefully be one of them. Doesn't look like they're going to be able to do that. They're middle of the road in 3-point shooting, which means they're going to have to try to go into the interior. That they try to get in the lane, they try to post up. Providence defense top 10 in the country in 2-point defense. So this Providence defense is absolutely fantastic. They shut down Marquette, which is not easy to do. Really, Kolek kind of shooting from the perimeter or driving was the only thing that they could create. And I don't think Butler has anybody of the capabilities of Tyler Kolek. And then on the offensive end, Providence is shooting a lot of threes. They're 61st in the country in 3-point attempts. Butler surrenders a lot of threes. The 3-point percentage for Providence is middle of the road, actually. They're 221st, but they knock down a ton against Marquette. I think they shoot it better at home than they have in some of these neutral court games. And then they got a big advantage again on the 2-point side. They're 24th in 2-point percentage. The Butler defense, 128th. The only issue for Providence has been turnovers, but this Butler defense doesn't force a lot of turnovers. So yeah, I'll join you on the -6 there for Providence. That just doesn't feel like enough points for me for a team who might be a top 3 team in the Big East. This Butler team certainly improved. Thad Matta's done a nice job, but we're still waiting to see a team go on the road in that first true road test and really impress us. So even Villanova, when they won at Creighton, they'd already gone and played at Kansas State. They took that game to overtime. So the times we have seen a team impress on the road, they've at least had some experience doing that. So give me the Friars here. I'll join you on that -6.
You mentioned the turnovers. When Providence is not turning the ball over and they're taking care of it, it allows them to set up their defense, and that's when they're at their best. They're really difficult to score on when they're able to get set and have all 5 back. So when they can take care of the basketball, and then like we all know in college basketball, shots tend to fall at home. When Providence is making threes, they're right there with UConn and Marquette. Will they continue to make threes throughout conference play? We'll have to see. Bryce Hopkins is one of their best players. He's not a great outside shooter. Devin Carter's really stepped up, a guy that has been a defensive player in his college career. When he shows out offensively, this Providence team's really good.
And one of the best names in college basketball, Ticket Gaines. Gaines played great against Marquette as well. So watch out for Ticket, the 6'7" senior wing for Providence. So yeah, -6 there on Providence. Another point, that was a great point on that if they take care of the ball, they can get back and set up their defense. It's the same thing on the glass. They don't really offensive rebound. They want to get back and get their defense set. And Butler's not a great rebounding team. They're 223rd on the defensive glass. So I don't think they're going to be able to grab the ball, and run it up the court because they struggled to even get the rebound in the first place. So yeah, I love Providence here, -6. And so that gives us a summary of the games of the day. Bets being Illinois -6 tonight, FAU Arizona over the 161, and Providence -6. Of course, those Saturday game lines just coming out, so you might get something better, you might get something worse. We shall see. I think so far when we do these Saturday previews, it's like half of the games have gone our direction and half of the games have gone the other, but it doesn't really end up having any impact on. I don't think we've had any that came down to like if we had gotten the Saturday line, it would have been different. So CLV, closing line value, sometimes it helps you, sometimes it doesn't. We'll see how it works out tomorrow.
When you do get to the lines, though, make sure you're using our website to find the best lines, because once the lines come out and there's movement at the books, they'll be balancing in different ways. So make sure you're getting the best number that you can.
Absolutely. cbb.vincerix.com. Tomorrow we'll see how these lines move and if we're on the right side or the wrong side, if we should have waited or if we should not have. Only time will tell. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We will be back probably next Friday. Actually, not a lot of college basketball taking place next week. And next Friday, we'll be able to give a quick preview of the Washington. Where is it? It's over here. Oh, it's on this side. Washington Huskies. Getting ready. We're getting closer, Hunter, to the big game. I got my tickets. I'm ready to go. We'll talk about it next Friday.
Yep. Looking forward to it.
All right.